Hi, Abby and John.
Hello,
How are you?
and doing well.
Oh, that's nice.
How about you?
I'm doing great. I really am.
Did you wax your toboggan so you can go sledding after the snow, or?
I think so. I also canceled an appointment, so there you go. I'm ready for enjoying it. Thanks for all you do for that group and all that work, that extra work.
Your audio was interrupted there.
I know. Just wanted to thank you for taking the lead on the transportation and the group.
I'm happy to do it, Jan. Thank
Well,
you.
a lot of work. You're right there, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, you got to create at least a semblance of order, huh?
Yeah, indeed.
Can I get a sound check? Can you hear me a little better?
Yes, very good.
Wonderful. Thanks.
Hi, John. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Hey, Lynn.
Hi.
Good evening, everybody.
Hey, Walter.
Walter.
We'll get started in just a sec.
Yep.
Okay, let's go ahead and get started tonight. Welcome, everybody. Hi, Jan.
Hi.
So let's see. We have a number of panelists tonight. We also have a good number of participants and attendees there in the audience. So welcome, everybody, to this December 14th, 2020 meeting of the Reston Comprehensive Plan Task Force. Before we get going, I just wanted to thank everybody for all your hard work this year. This has been a rather extraordinary year. And I think we're just starting to really hit stride with this task force and starting to get some good work products underway. So thanks everybody for your participation in this effort. Also, I wanted to jump to the second item on the agenda. John Mooney has a subgroup on transportation that's been doing some good work. John, do you want to take a minute or two and bring us up to date on that effort?
Thanks, Walter. I certainly will. So basically, we meet, we have a meeting one day after every task force meeting. And we have assigned ourselves, after considering Walter's mandate to us, we've assigned ourselves 5 work products. The first is a work plan and timetable, which you should have received the final version of, approved at least by the Transportation Connectivity Working Group, approved last at our meeting on December 1st. The other four work products we have is a near-term one, which is a first topic outline of transportation issues for discussion by the full task force, which we hope to bring to you to our task force for your consideration on at the January the 11th meeting. Then the middle term product, which we hope to deliver, let's see, on in time for the February 22nd meeting, is a polished outline. So after the full task force has discussed the draft outline, I mean, this is a polished draft line, that is the second product. Then we'll have a polished discussion of a polished outline. And then the fourth and fifth stages are to come up with an actual redraft of the transportation sections of the comprehensive plan. And our goal is to have that to everybody by April the 5th, if all of the dates hold. So what we're trying to do is to combine the community-wide elements that were done during phase one in the 2014 plan with the transportation elements in the TSA, because there's a lot of repetition, and they were done that way because it was done in two phases. So you had a phase one transportation part and a phase two transportation part. What we need to do is integrate the two. So that's what we're aiming at. So if there are any questions, I'd be happy to do it, but that's our short version.
John, thank you very much. And just a reminder to panelists and also to attendees, if you would like to be recognized, raise your virtual hand if you can. And just as a reminder, the way you get to that is basically open up the participants bar, and then you'll see a little hand to be raised at the bottom there. I don't see any hands up for you, John. Thank you very much, John. Appreciate your work, and thank you for that report tonight. Okay, the next update we have, and then we'll go into the meat of tonight's agenda, is from staff. There have been several issue areas that have been, topic areas that have been covered, at least initially, on population, on village centers, and actually, St. Clair, if you or Chris could give us an update on analysis and next steps on some of those things.
Thank you very much, Supervisor Alcorn. So yeah, we just wanted to kind of give an update on kind of the final items that staff is working on coming out of that November 23rd task force meeting, where we discussed, population projections, population forecasting, and village centers. So a couple of things. One of the things, the methodology that was provided to the task force that night, the presentation, was based on maximizing residential development potential. There was a request of whether we could provide the methodology using the maximum non-residential potential. So that is something we are working on. We will be providing that back to the task force. There was also a request for more information, details of the haircut, and that was kind of looking at, what the full build out is, and then looking at, different factors that can happen. What is likely to be the build out? So we're going to provide some more detail on the haircut that was used. Also looking at comparing to, what type of haircut has been used in other areas of the county. There was also some question regarding, the boundary that was used for the information. I think questions regarding the McNair Farms area and kind of where that border for Reston should extend. So we are going to break it out to kind of provide the numbers kind of based on the traditional boundaries of Reston, and then kind of looking at what the kind of the TSA number we call the new boundary. So we will kind of separate the numbers so it's clear. There was also a request for providing a table quantifying all remaining areas with planned potential above existing development without a rezoning. So we're providing those details. There were some questions that were brought up regarding kind of the 2040 forecast and what was the forecast prior to the adoption of the, the last plan amendments. And then there was questions regarding comparing kind of the 2040 forecast to 2045. So we're going to provide a summary kind of explaining how that all works, explaining what all went into kind of, again, the replanning of the PRC area. So we're going to provide detailed information that addresses that. Then also the numbers that were in the presentation that were provided to you, it was brought up by a couple of TESRA members that there was a memo provided by the zone administrator back in 2017, and there seemed to be a difference in numbers. So we're going to analyze kind of both numbers to ensure we can provide, just be clear on what the actual numbers should be. And then a couple of questions, there were questions regarding the Upper Potomac District multiplier and how does it compare contrast to the countywide average. So I'm going to provide details on that. Also tracking how household size changes have tracked over time. We've been providing analysis on that. And then there were some questions regarding looking at the projections, what type of public outreach was conducted. So we're going to be coordinating with the Economic, Demographic, and Statistical Research Unit to understand what type of public outreach goes into that analysis. So at this point, our staff is working on a appropriate timeline to, carry out all the work that's needs to be done to provide those materials. So once we have that timeline, we will provide that to the TASRA just to give an update. And if there was anything that was brought up during the meeting that we have missed, that we haven't just, that I didn't just kind of discuss, please, through Jose, just send us any update because we want to make sure that we capture all the requests that came out of that meeting. And that's all I have at this time.
All right, St. Clair, thank you very much. I see Mr. Mooney's hand is up. John, go ahead and unmute.
Thank you, Walter. A very short request, St. Clair. At least at my end, your audio came across as rather garbled. I'm wondering whether it would be, you listed a number of items. Could you just do the briefest written summary? I'm not going to ask you to go over it again, but a briefest written summary that you could share with us of all those topics that you mentioned. I would greatly appreciate it.
Yes, I absolutely can do that.
Thank you.
All right, great. And Charles Colby. Go ahead. Oh, Charles, you need to unmute yourself there. There you go.
There we go. Thanks. Hi, St. Clair. I had a question, and we might have touched upon this a little last time. I was having flashbacks when I used to have to do this as a graduate student, as consulting for a Pizza Hut. And but I remember when I did this, I did it two ways. I looked at the nighttime population, but I also looked at the daytime population. Are you going to do anything like that, which I guess would apply to maybe trying to project traffic volume and things like that?
Yes, and we did catch that from the meeting, and I'm guessing you're looking more like at AM and PM peaks and things like that. So yes, we are going to take a look at that.
It's like you might have 60,000 people or 100,000 people in Reston, but then you might also have 50,000 workers in the daytime.
Right. So you're saying people maybe not even within Reston, but who are coming to for work in the evening. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah. So how many are gonna be here working in offices? And then that determines, I guess, how much commercial you need. I don't know. Really, I rely on your expertise as well on the necessity for that.
Yeah, I'll coordinate with our quantitative folks who deal with that and make sure, see if that is something that, yes, can be worked into our analysis.
Cool. Thank you.
Say, Walter, can you hear me?
I can. John Carter, yes.
Oh, could you, one of the things that we'll get to soon would be the conversion of commercial square footage to jobs. Could you might not know that right off the top of your head, but the various types of commercial and how you convert that to jobs so we can get to the jobs housing balance. Is that easy?
I can't confirm that's easy or not, but I'll speak to our folks who deal with that and find out.
I think you use your round 8 version that you send to COG. And then the other thing, can you separate out the, particularly in the TSA area, what's approved plus built as opposed to what's projected?
Yes, we can do that.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, thank you all. I don't see any other hands raised. Oh, I do see Bill Penniman. Bill.
Yeah, St. Clair, just one question. This may have been in what you were describing, but in case it wasn't, could you provide what the 0.25 FAR for the village centers, which is in the comprehensive plan, how that compares to what's on the ground or what's already been approved? Is that up, down, flat? Just trying to get a ballpark idea.
Good. You can take a look at that, yes.
All right, fantastic. All right. Oh, I do see a couple more hands. Lynn Elston. Lynn. Oh.
Yep, unmute.
There you go.
Thank you. Yeah, I had actually sent my question in using the chat function, but I realized that I wasn't going to be acknowledged through chat. So I was just wondering if anyone from Reston Association or any of the Reston civic groups are going to be working with St. Clair and the county on these calculations? Or are they coming up with the calculations or doing the calculations on their own and then coming back to the group?
St. Clair, is that something you could address?
I mean, from what I understand, I mean, our staff is going to be working on those calculations and providing them back to the task force.
Okay.
Yeah, and actually, I believe John Mooney, I believe there's also Chris Caperton says we will show our map. I'm going to be keeping an eye on that chat, Lynn.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's see, I do see David Vanell has his hand up as well.
Yes, good evening. St. Clair, I have a question regarding the population in Reston during the day, i.e. the business population versus the resident population. And for years now, I have thought that the common wisdom is that there's more people coming into Reston to work than there are leaving Reston to work somewhere else in the area. Is that your understanding? Is that false wisdom? And are we taking account of that when we deal with, certainly all the transportation and connectivity issues we're doing, but in the sense of building and build out, are we taking care of that fact, if it is in fact a fact?
Unfortunately, I'm not an expert in the quantitative stuff, so I don't know off the top of my head, but I can check in with our staff just to get confirmation on that and get a response to you.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, David. Anyone else wishing to speak? Oh, actually, Tammy, I see your hand up.
Thank you. In this regard, COVID has changed an awful lot of things. And we had talked months ago about having whomever are the experts with the crystal balls to determine what we might predict for the future. I know from reading business journals almost every day that workers are not keen on the majority of workers are not keen on resuming the commute, which is going to change an awful lot about Reston and is really salient to our planning. who could we expect to help us with that, or at least give us some prognostications, and when? I would say the sooner the better, although later will be more accurate, but I don't know that we can wait and do a good plan if we don't have a clue. Thank you.
I think as far as staff, I think the challenge is, I think right now, it's, as you said, later would be more, predictable. And something we're still in this pandemic, so I think it's hard to really know what the answers are at this point. But I guess that's something we can discuss with the supervisor on what is the best step in addressing that.
Yeah, and St. Clair, maybe in the staff team, maybe can talk a little bit about anyone that's being used currently as a resource on that issue as well. I don't know if there's anybody available, but okay, Tammy, thank you.
Yeah, Victor Hoskins had talked a little bit about that, but not anything in great depth. So I was looking at his website to see if he had any seminars or thing. But anyway, that's the for people who don't know, Fairfax County Development Authority Chief.
Yep. Thank you, Tammy. Yeah, good point. I see Gary Maupin has his hand up. Gary? Gary, go ahead and unmute. Oh, there you go.
Thank you. I was just going to say, I think we said we were going to do what Tammy suggested a few meetings ago, and we were going to look for some outside experts besides, what the county could find. We're going to try and find people to come speak to us.
Okay. Yeah, Gary, we can try to tee that up. I just saw somebody suggested maybe getting representative from one of the larger employers. That's one thought. Maybe another way or two. I'm not sure of who's doing studies right now, but there might be somebody working on some sort of regional study as well that could be useful.
Exactly. That sounds good.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Gary. John Mooney, do you have your hand up again? Well, that might be old. I do see John Farrell with his hand up. So John is an attendee. John, do you want to go ahead and, Jose, go ahead and unmute John Farrell.
Walter, I just wanted to address the issue that Tammy brought up. This came up before. I recommended to you to get in touch with Jones Lang LaSalle, who are brokers in commercial office space. I also mentioned KLNB, who are brokers that specialize in retail space. Also want to mention the Schar Center at George Mason University, who regularly report on absorption and vacancy and employment and those kind of things. Last week, the Washington Business Journal reported that office vacancy is now up to 30 million square feet in Northern Virginia, with 3 million square feet of sublet space and that's an increase in the last year of 10 million square feet of new leasing, and the 3 million sublet number is an increase also. That's just within the last year. So those three resources are three that I would hope the staff would reach out to have a conversation with, because they've got different on the market. My law firm just renegotiated our lease and obtained serious concessions because of the softness of the commercial office market. So the information is there. It's not hard, and prognostications are what the market's relying on. So the information's available. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, John. Okay. I don't see anyone else's hand up. So with that, let's move on to the next item on the agenda. We have actually tonight we have a panel to talk about open space. Now, I just want to remind the task force, this is not the first time we've had open space on a task force agenda. We did have, and there's a link in the agenda to the presentation that the Fairfax County Park Authority made a month or so ago. And Andy Dorlester, I see Andy is actually on here in case anybody has any questions about that. Just to refresh everybody's memory, the focus of that was, hi Andy, the focus was a little bit more on recreation. So athletic fields, recreation through pocket parks, other recreation related themes, which is of course the focus of, at least part of the focus of the Fairfax County Park Authority. So, and if anybody has any questions on that, feel free to raise your hand or pipe up. We're going to be actually addressing other issues related to open space tonight. And before I introduce the panelists, we have tonight a discussion first amongst the panelists. We're going to hear some of their thoughts, and then we're going to get a chance, there'll be a chance for task force members, and if we have time, attendees to ask questions or make points about this. And we have, we're really looking tonight at questions relating to accessibility of open space, public use, how public is the open space. Also, some more practical issues like maintenance responsibility, and then in sort of a broader sense, the role of open space in placemaking. So tonight we have four, actually maybe five, I guess, panelists. First from RA, we have Larry Butler. We also have Robert Gowdy from Reston Town Center Association. We have Diana Smith from Herndon, Reston, Indivisible. And then we have Abby Dunner and Tom Barnett from basically our Office of Ending Homelessness, which I'm not sure about the new acronym or the old acronym there, but I know that's recently changed. They can update us on that. And with each of these panelists, what I'd like to do is invite them to, and I guess starting with Larry, to address some of the issues that they see relating to those issues. If they'd like to say a few words and share some of their thoughts on some of the most important, I guess, themes or things that the task force should take into consideration as we look at the comprehensive plan. So, Larry, can I put you on the spot and have you start off? Would you like to share a few thoughts on that?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. So I think I know most everybody on this call, but the, representing the association and its interest in open space, obviously we have about 1,350 acres throughout the community, but we do not have it other than a small piece that we got from the SECAS development, really in the TSA. And I think one of the important questions that the task force and the other folks, panelists here, have to consider is the different operations between private open space and truly public open space. So when I think of truly public open space, I think of what the Park Authority has. So it's open to all. And quite frankly, the Reston Association open space or common area throughout the community is technically open to all because we don't, microchip people that are walking the pathways. The only thing we check is pools and tennis courts, right? But if they want to get on the multi-purpose courts and so forth. But, it's a little bit different because it's really there for the benefit of the members who pay for it, which is the, 22,000 assessment paying members of RA. And, the other kind of game changer from our perspective is that we're out on the private insurance market. So, the risks associated with, whether you have vendors on there and, other activities and so forth, it's a little bit different for an organization, a private corporation like RA, than it is a true public entity that, has afforded different protections, quite frankly. So I think that's something we need to consider throughout this whole discussion of open space. The only other comment in kind of my opening remarks here is that the open space that we're seeing in a lot of these developments, is very compact. We're not seeing, other than the Isaac Newton Square application, which they've proffered a full ball field and park space to the Park Authority. We're not seeing that in other locations in the redevelopment of Reston, which I find, quite frankly, a tragedy, because it does not fit the mold of Reston, where the accessibility of our facilities are, in almost all cases, walkable from many, many neighborhoods. And so, I think we missed the boat, quite frankly, early on in some of the approvals that had come forward already, where that is not going to be the case, where for certain types of recreation or open space, you're going to have to get in your car, take a bus, take a bike, which is totally fine, to get there. And so I think those are some of the things we have to think about.
Larry, thank you very much. Appreciate sharing your perspective and some initial thoughts. And next we have Robert Gowdy. Robert, I believe, Robert, with the Reston Town Center Association. And do you have some slides that you would like to share with us by chance?
I do, Walter. There are only 7.
I've heard that.
Yeah, just take a few minutes to go through them.
No problem. And Lisa, if you could share, I guess, Robert's screen. There we go.
That should
All right,
be.
Robert.
How's that?
That's looking good, except there's a, oh, there we go. That's good.
All right. So, yeah, hello, everyone. Thank you very much, Supervisor Alcorn, for inviting me. It's really a great pleasure to be here tonight to talk about a topic that's so important to all of us here in our built and growing community. So I've got just 6, 7 slides that I think will help contextualize my comments, and I can go through those, I think, here very quickly in about 5 minutes. First, I think I want to make the comment that built environments intentionally across the globe mix public and private open spaces. And of course, I've famously put the example here of Central Park and Rockefeller Center in New York City, but there are countless other examples across the globe. And Reston, in fact, was built on that model, right? So we have county parks, we have the W&OMB Trail, which is owned by a regional park authority. We have RE's assets that Larry was just talking about. We have RTCA assets that I'm going to talk about a little bit here. And then there are private homeowner association and landowner assets as well. For example, where I live at West Market, there are trails that are accessible to everybody in the community. There we go. Let's try that. So we think there are real benefits for private ownership of open space. The 3 here, I think, are the biggest ones. First, that oftentimes, the public treasury can struggle, especially in an anti-tax environment, with funding required maintenance and upgrades that private funds can probably more easily handle. You'll see that with a number of the examples I'll provide tonight in Town Center. Second, and I know this is somewhat controversial and will seem counterintuitive to people, but because it's private open space, you can protect and preserve some of the space in the community for your political activity. Let me contextualize what I mean by that. It's essential that we have places like parks and county spaces where people can exercise their First Amendment rights, gather, protest, occupy, all of that. But it's also nice in the community to be able to get to spaces where you can be free of that. And so in Town Center, I know with our audience that comes here, they very much appreciate the fact that they know reliably they are not going to roll into Town Center and roll up on an NRA gun rally or a Proud Boys demonstration, because we don't allow that kind of thing. And then the third big advantage, I think, is for us, there's great flexibility and a much more streamlined bureaucracy to try to deal with putting on events in these private spaces. And that includes, in Town Center's case, oftentimes closing the streets. In our case, the streets are owned by Boston Properties, our largest landowner, and we team with them every day in putting on these events. And it is a huge advantage that I don't have to run around and try to herd cats on figuring out how to close this street, that, all with different permissions. We can deal with one entity, and it's me and Boston Properties thinking about, is this an event that makes sense? Let's make it happen. I would note, of course, that closing streets advances transit-oriented goals of more walkable communities. So a lot of people don't understand who RTCA is. We're a lot like RA. We're kind of the quasi governing authority for the town center district. The big difference between us and RA is that we are both a commercial and residential partnership. So RA is only residential members. We have both. And indeed, commercial properties pay over 80% of our assessments, which I know is music to the ears of my stakeholders and maybe to many of you as well. We're about 500 of Reston's 8,400 acres, and that's coming right out of the Reston Comprehensive Plan. You see there the responsibilities of the association, which largely track the kinds of things that RA does in its district. This is the district. I think a lot of people think of that bold and slashed area in the middle as the town center. That is the urban core of what we know as the downtown. But the district is much larger than that. As you can see, we extend from Target to Oracle along Sunset Hills, from Oracle to Spectrum all the way to Harris Teeter along Reston Parkway, Harris from Spectrum over to Reston Landing, the Edgewater condos and the Reston Hospital on the west side, and then back to Target. We have everything in that big block except for what we call Town Center North, or the county government area. So these are the three principal RTCA-owned spaces that I manage and am responsible for. One is Mercury Fountain Plaza. To give you an idea of some of these cost issues that we're talking about, to repair and replace that fountain over time will cost us in excess of multiple millions of dollars. Just to replace the Italian marble bowl that is at the kind of the centerpiece of the fountain, that alone will cost $1 million to replace. And it is up for replacement probably in the next 6 years. So you can see how quickly these kinds of things would tax the public fisc. It annually costs us about $50,000 just to operate that fountain. And of course, it's a space that is really central to Reston as a gathering space. I love this quote from Bob Simon in the Reston Story. Those of you who haven't seen that film, I encourage it. Storycatcher Productions, Rebecca Winger-Jabby did that for the 50th anniversary of Reston. And you can see the quote there that I'm hopeful that Fountain Square will be a model for hundreds of others around the country because I think it is just about perfect. It's pretty nice. The next asset that I control that I think a lot of people will be familiar with is Town Square Park. You know that now because we have just installed over this past year the 50-foot monumental steel sculpture Buoyant Force in partnership with Greater Reston Arts Center, Reston Community Center, and lots of others. Here's another example of how privately held open space can benefit from different kinds of funding sources. 6 years ago, we didn't like the way that Sasaki had originally designed this. We didn't think it was adequately people-friendly. There were some paths in it that didn't lead to anywhere. There were benches that were disconnected. And so we approved a almost $400,000 renovation of that space to make it a much more people-friendly space. This past year, when COVID hit and when outdoor seating became such a priority, we pivoted immediately and invested $50,000 on new permanent seating at the top of the park. Some of you will remember the yellow umbrella and black seating that was at the top of the park. We doubled that capacity with the new seating we put there. And by the way, we donated to RA the 4 previous ensembles of the yellow and black tables, which are still in incredibly good shape. And we're likely next year going to pursue a $100,000 artificial turf install in our amphitheater seating, which has been very, very difficult to retain and grow grass there. And as we do more shows and programming there, and I'll talk about that in a second, we want to make sure we create a nice, clean, accessible space there for everybody who's coming to those events. And then the last space that I manage is the West Market Stormwater Pond, but it's not just a stormwater pond. As many of you know, of course, we've put an incredibly valuable walking trail all around that pond. We're responsible for all of the maintenance in the pond. The county doesn't want the maintenance responsibilities on their pond. These ponds, they're very expensive. We have to maintain the sluice gate. We have to maintain an emergency plan. We have to landscape and prune all the trees that come in there. We prune multiple times a year just to keep what they call service trees that, prop up along the burn. So it's a very expensive undertaking, but it's a very valued community amenity. So what does all that translate to when we want to run events here in the town center? I don't think people appreciate the extent and the robustness of the programming that we do in town center. I've characterized it here into 3 basic headings: cultural, charitable, and community. On the cultural side, you can see this, I think, impressive list. Reston Concerts in the Town, which we hold up at the Pavilion, which is the Boston Properties privately held space that we negotiate rent-free to do these concerts. To put these concerts on, perspective, over $120,000 a year to put on those concerts, all paid for privately by the Reston Town Center Association. We've added Sunday art and Thursday lunch in the park to animate our park space with Shenandoah University Conservatory on Sunday's concert series, and Thursday lunch in the park with George Mason University, all jointly partnered with our great content partner, Reston Community Center. Of course, the Grace Northern Virginia Fine Arts Festival, one of the tentpole events in the community, attracts 30,000 people over the course of the weekend. Public Art Reston's Chalk Fest, the Washington West Film Festival. And sadly, this year, we had to cancel our first ever Theater in the Park. We hope it will be coming next fall. It's a really exciting partnership with Next Stop Theater in Herndon and Reston Community Center, so stay tuned for that. You see the list of charitable events that we do. We do dozens of these every year. Runway to the Cure, Tour to the Cure, Walk to End Alzheimer's, Light the Night, Canine Companions for Independence Dog Fest. We raise hundreds of thousands of dollars through these events every year in the town center for these charities. And those facilities are generally provided to these charities free of charge for these events. And finally, the community events. You know, of course, unfortunately, we just had to cancel the holiday parade and tree lighting. We've adapted with some other programming that, because COVID rates are spiking, we just had to call off. The Greater Reston Chamber of Commerce's Taste of Reston. Again, another partnership with Reston Community Center, our Family Fun Entertainment Series on Saturday, appealing to our youngest citizens, our children. Dog Days of Summer, Pet Fiesta, R4, the recycling event that we do at the Pavilion. So it's a very robust, that's only a sampling of the events that we do here in the town center, all privately paid for. What is our open space policy? Now, I think this is really important and something that you all want to consider. This is what we do in the town center. I can't speak to what other spaces do, but we don't allow any hawking of goods or services. We don't allow any pamphleteering. So again, I think people coming to the town center don't want to be accosted by people engaging in kind of, outward commercial activity. We do not allow private reservations of our public space outside of RTCA presented or sponsored events, and those are always open to the public. And what does that do? That makes sure that we always preserve our space as free and open to everyone all the time. And there is no organized commercial, political, or religious activity allowed. Again, we think there are strong benefits to that so that people don't come upon some substitute your event that you would not like to see, political rally that you would not like to see. None of that happens here. So I think that's the end of my slides, and I hope that was informative and helpful to what you wanted to hear, Supervisor Alcorn.
Well, Robert, thank you very much. I really appreciate you taking the time to be here tonight. And we will have a chance for folks to ask questions, and there'll be some more discussion after we get through the other panelists. So let's move on. Next, from Herndon, Reston, Indivisible, we have Diana Smith. Diana, welcome. You didn't need any slides to be a panelist tonight, so.
No, I didn't, but I prepared something.
Okay, good. Go right ahead.
Okay, so first of all, thanks for asking me to talk tonight. I mean, that was really nice. Herndon, Reston, Indivisible has spent the last 4 years in constant resistance to the loss of democracy across this country. In doing so, we ran into all sorts of issues here in Reston that also threatened democracy. And my comments are coming from observation and not from any special expertise. I think the characteristics of a public open space include areas that promote human contact and social activities, that is safe, welcoming, and accommodating for all folks, and will promote community involvement. So Reston has over 1,300 acres of open space, and I'm not including the last speaker's acres in there. But for the most part, this open space in Reston is either owned by private companies or by Reston HOAs. So I'm looking to try to protect public open space in Reston. I think privatization creates issues for democracy. One example was when a group that I was with wanted to register voters at the Wheelie Metro Plaza. We were told the only area we could use, not under control of Comstock Properties, was in the bus garage under the plaza. This area was polluted with bus fumes and loud running engines, and you just could not register people to vote in such an environment. We learned that Fairfax County had given away the plaza rights for 99 years to the Comstock Properties. and they essentially owned it. Another example, at the same place, I tried to campaign in the 2019 election for a candidate at the metro station. Comstock security called the police on me, but not on others campaigning for another candidate who was also there. She was a Comstock vice president. She later said that she considered the plaza her backyard. She could use it, but the other candidates could not. I've seen at Wheelie homeless people sitting on benches and moved on by security guards for no perceivable reason, except for maybe they were ill-kempt. In June, following the killing of Rodney King, people chose to march in solidarity with Black Lives Matter, but it was difficult to identify a place to meet up that wasn't owned or privatized or managed by an HOA, and they decided to meet at the Dulles Access Overpass on Reston Parkway, which is clearly not a good choice, not a perfect choice. And they marched down Reston Parkway. They couldn't necessarily pick any of the other main meeting places because, as was said by the previous speaker, there was no way that you could advocate for a political movement inside of the town center. And like Anne is a private HOA and probably has the same conditions. Remarkably, as Reston Connections later pointed out in their article, Boston Properties did not stop the marchers. My problem is that I don't think that public political activity should be managed by anybody except by the government within the First Amendment. I worry about the continued loss of any small space available to the community members who lack homes or adequate home space and look for outdoor opportunities to socialize. The people who are being moved away by development of open space, they can be kicked out for any reason by the owner or manager. I don't think human rights should be denied can't be denied in a democratically elected government, but can be by HOAs and private business. So what I'm advocating here for is I'd like to use the development of the new library as a kickstart for reclaiming the rights for publicly owned open space. I've heard some rumors that Fairfax County may cede the land for the new library to private developers, just like they did with Wheelie. And I think this is so wrong in so many ways. The library plaza can be a community asset, a free speech asset, a place where people can assemble. The size of the plaza can be extended to include parkland and other public functions. The government center, the public services infrastructures, and open space should be the heart of any redevelopment done in the area around the government center. What is built above our public structures must not impact the services and benefits and open public use of the plazas and parks that are beneath them or on the surrounding grounds. Existing laws and government functions can protect and manage the land use, and the maintenance cost can come out of the fees from the people who are living above, or the organizations that have property above these areas. In conclusion, if the Reston Open Space Plan is successful, there will be no more ceding of in my opinion, there will be no more ceding of Fairfax land, open space land to developers. The community will be the owners and the managers of our public open space, and we will have democratically selected places that we can go. Thank you.
All right, Diana, thank you very much. Appreciate all your activism over the years and all your work in the public space. Maybe not physically public space, but in the civic space anyway. So thank you, Diana, very much. And now, lastly, we have Abby. I don't know if you're going to speak, or Tom, or both, but okay, great. Hi, good evening, Tom. And just to put this in context, within the spirit of One Fairfax, one of the things that we like to do whenever possible is try to look at these items from a perspective that maybe isn't widely shared and perhaps is not widely voiced. So, Tom, you're sort of helping us a little bit understand what folks who are homeless, maybe some of the perspective of open space. And before you start, Tom, I do want to just remind everybody that even though it's not always visible, our homeless population in Reston is there. I just drove past this evening the new hypothermia shelter which just opened fairly recently, and it looked pretty busy inside. So, Tom, thank you for sharing some thoughts and insights.
Sure. My name is Tom Barnett, and I am here with Abby Dunner. The Office to Prevent and End Homelessness is a division of the Fairfax County Department of Housing and Community Development. So we are specifically responsible for the wide range of homeless assistance programs here in Fairfax County, including shelters and street outreach and prevention and rehousing programs. Abby specifically is responsible for the hypothermia program and all of our outreach work. And so when it comes to outreach, as we can talk about, it has a great deal to deal with people in the open spaces. And so that's, I think, partially why we're here. But when we talk about people who are homeless, there's folks who are sheltered and folks who are unsheltered. The Embry Rucker Community Shelter has been here in Reston since the mid to late 80s. And is slated for redevelopment. It's in need of a larger space, as well as more housing for people with nowhere else to go. So when you talk about people who are unsheltered, these are folks who are not at Embry Rucker and are not at the hypothermia prevention shelter. They may be sleeping outside, they may be sleeping in the woods, they may be sleeping in their cars. And you may see them, the most visible are those who are sleeping obviously outside with minimal shelter, perhaps a tent, perhaps nothing but a sleeping bag in a bus stop. And many times they are the most vulnerable of the homeless population because they have come with a host of different challenges in terms of physical and mental health issues. So they often have chronic health conditions that have been neglected, oftentimes because of years on the streets. They have many times a lifetime of trauma and abuse, and oftentimes because they are unsheltered, they are actually some of the most common victims of abuse and theft and violence, just broadly. So the challenge obviously is housing. Only housing ends homelessness. The experiences of folks who become homeless are very diverse. They may be victims of domestic violence. They may be individuals with serious mental illness. They may come with substance use disorders. They may have experienced a life crisis and compounded with other crises that turned someone who thought they would never be homeless suddenly homeless. But oftentimes because of the lack of support within their greater social network and because of a crisis, they find themselves experiencing homelessness, and it can be very challenging getting out of homelessness. And so oftentimes our office receives calls from community members about seeing someone outside that they're concerned about. And we respond in partnership with local nonprofit organizations such as Cornerstones. Our goal and our focus is always on the individual who is experiencing homelessness and trying to help them find better housing options. It can be very difficult, obviously, with a long-term disability and limited income. But so that often it starts with engaging and building trust of an individual, but that is something that can take a long time. And so oftentimes there's a challenge of many different stakeholders with different competing needs. You see an individual who's sleeping at the bus stop and you're concerned, but you also want them to to be somewhere safe, but that individual will often choose not to come into a shelter. And so the challenge for a community is, well, what happens? And it often varies a lot depending on whether the individual is on a private or publicly owned space. In a privately owned space, it's relatively simple where the property owner can simply say, we don't want them on the property. In publicly owned spaces, it can be more challenging because obviously someone who is homeless is part of the public. And so if there's not rules around sleeping outside or on that specific property, we're in a challenging spot trying to figure out how do we meet the needs of the individual experiencing homelessness as well as the community. And this can take oftentimes time. So we're happy to answer questions as we discuss this more, but I hope that provides a little context as to our role and some insight into the experiences of people who are experiencing homelessness.
Tom, thank you very much. Appreciate you sharing those insights and those thoughts. So just a little bit more background for the task force, and then I'll see if there are any questions that anyone has, and then we'll have a little bit probably more discussion before we move on. But there's currently the issues that were talked about here tonight are typically not ones that are addressed, if at all, very much in a comprehensive plan. Most of the open space issues where they are addressed in terms of recreation use, in terms of tree save, in terms of more, I would call them traditional open space issues. So tonight, one of the things that I'd love to see if ultimately there might be any guidance from this task force for the comprehensive plan going forward in terms of guidance for how should we treat open spaces, what kind of mix should we have, or should we be shooting for in Reston? Are there certain areas that maybe are more conducive and more appropriate for more, I would call it more public type open spaces as opposed to privately managed open spaces? And then the whole range of kind of questions in between. So if anyone has any questions or comments, go ahead and raise your hand. And in the meantime, I'm going to throw out actually a question or two to get some of the conversation going. So actually, I'm going to go back to you, Larry. And Larry, how does RA deal with access issues like the ones either in terms of political activities on Reston Association property or let's say how about homelessness issues? How do you deal with people that use RA property as a place for temporary shelter?
So that's two questions. Let me deal with the first one. We rarely have, I would say, people come to us, to conduct political activity on their property. I think most people probably recognize that it's private, and quite frankly, if we get a lot of complaints, I imagine we would likely shut it down because we're there to serve the membership. And if there's a piece of, whether it's a park or something, people that live around that park, who pay our way, frankly, if they find that it's something that is, I guess, really labeled a nuisance, we do have those clauses in our governing documents. We cannot allow something to be a nuisance to other property owners, as we're subject to the covenants as well. With respect to homeless, we do encounter that occasionally. What we try to do is contact Cornerstones as a first measure to try to go out and to speak with the people. Again, in most cases, we hear about it because of our members who live adjacent to those properties having concerns, safety concerns, whether for themselves or for their kids. This happened, we had one a couple of years ago down near Hunter's Woods that, the tricky part for us too is that, they may be members and who are temporarily out of their homes, and our common area is there for the use of the members. But again, if it's something that creates a nuisance, sometimes even a perceived nuisance, that may be something we have to act on.
All right, Larry, thank you very much. And I see Diana who's a panelist, had her hand up. Diana, do you want to address that? And then we do have several questions, so I want to get through task force members' questions.
I was just thinking when I was listening to his answer that we are a spatial area that includes the Reston Association area and the RTCA area, but we also have other areas like the Dulles Corridor, the Government Center, the stuff that Fairfax owns. So if we think of our community as all of those, not just memberships and not just those who own homes and stuff, we should be talking in this master plan about all of the community. And that would include the homeless as well as the people who are in our area, our community, but don't necessarily live in one of those boundaries. So I just wanted to bring that out.
Okay, thank you very much, Diana. Let's go ahead and go to some of the questions. I'm going to start alphabetical order by first name. So Burton, congratulations. Your first name starts with B. So go ahead and ask your question.
Thanks, Walter. Yeah, I have some kind of disjointed thoughts and appreciate the panelists coming tonight and offering their perspective. I definitely sympathize with the need for there to be a space for freedom of expression, and but it seems like at least lately, the two sides that are most active and demonstrating are from the most extreme, and their point is not just to express themselves, it's to disrupt other people who are not wanting to be disrupted. So, so that's one thing. I think the Fairfax County government property that's north of the town center is a space where freedom of speech could be exercised, but it's not desirable because there's no public there to hear them. Secondly, on the open space issue in general, I definitely see the case for more county government management of open space versus private space. But on the other hand, looking at how the open space that the county has is managed versus how the private open space is managed, I don't really see the Fairfax County management as a model. There's a whole lot of litter and trash and human feces that I see in the county land north of the town center that's just disgusting to me. And I'd like to see that cleaned up more systematically. And, contrast that really easily with the land that is maintained by the town center, which is, it's a small area of land with a lot of usage, a lot of visibility. They really stay on top of it. And then the Reston Association managed land, which just has a lot less foot traffic. So less people going through there and more space, so less concentration of litter. But I would say in Reston, most of the concentration of litter is highest on the land that the county is responsible for. So that just makes me hesitant to trust the county with management of more open space. And then I was interested in Mr. Barnett's comment about legislation, and I thought that he might have some ideas on legislation that would be beneficial in the county or the state that would empower the county to take action to help homeless people who need it. It sounds like there's some sort of no man's land that they fall into legislatively that prevents there being action from taken. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Burton. I think Inova owns some of that property you're talking about, by the way. Tom, did you want to say anything more about, I guess, legislation or policy? Wasn't sure if you were going in that direction or not.
Well, it's a challenging question because I wouldn't say anyone has solved this. I will say back in September of 2018, the Ninth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, in a case out of Boise, Idaho, made a ruling when the local government tried to sweep an encampment there and stop them. And it was based on a lawsuit. And so what you see across the country is many communities trying to enact laws only to be gone to appeals and stopped. And in the end, they're not so much trying to help people experiencing homelessness as so much remove the sight of them.
Can I add something too, if that's okay?
Thank you, Tom. Yes, please, Abby.
Thanks. So yeah, it's important also to remember that people who are experiencing unsheltered homelessness, so folks who are outside, during the winter months, we expand our shelter capacity with the hypothermia prevention program, which means that anybody who is seeking shelter has access to it. Now with our the county's COVID response, we have our hotel program that's increased our shelter capacity by 400 plus rooms. In the normal kind of world, pre-COVID, post-COVID, and in the non-winter months, we have a very limited number of shelter beds for people who are experiencing homelessness. Single adults, we have 122 regular beds for the entire county, where we serve 30,000 or so people over the course of a year. Granted, that includes families, but so the ratio of people who are seeking shelter to the amount of shelter that we have does not match, which means that even if people during the non-winter months wanted to come inside, they often don't have the opportunity to do so. And this is not me advocating for more shelter, but instead really more housing, because as we move people out of existing shelter beds into housing, we are then able to shelter more people. So a lot of the kind of nuisance related issues that come along with unsheltered homelessness can be alleviated by more housing, by us being able to kind of move folks through the system quicker.
All right, thank you very much, Abby. We have 4 hands raised. Let's go through all 4, and then we do need to move on to our next topic on the agenda tonight. But next we have Christopher Daniel, following the alpha by first name.
Thank you, sir. So I think, thank you again to the panelists for the presentation, really helpful. I think as the resident perspective from the Architecture Review Board and someone who works in the field of history and historic preservation, I want to highlight that public spaces are frequently the spaces that end up becoming recognized as historic properties, heritage resources, and end up becoming focal points for history in our communities. So it's an important thing to keep in mind that public space is a key aspect from a huge spectrum of history. And so I think anything we do in this comprehensive plan should advocate for that in a balanced perspective. But also as a citizen of Reston, I think about particularly the One Fairfax initiative, and several of the areas of focus highlight the fact that we're trying to achieve equity. And public spaces really also help mesh that goal. There is a balance between public and private spaces that do allow that. And I think that Fairfax is trying to balance that with that. But I think those public spaces allow a lot more control over achieving those equity goals, because the county is the one that's helping control that direction. I tried to keep myself short and sweet there, so there we go.
All right, thank you very much, Christopher. Appreciate that. Next we have, I believe, David Vanell.
Yes, sir. A quick question. How is it that the county, or under what conditions does the county decide that it wishes to cede control of public land, public space, open space to a developer? I believe it was Diana who mentioned that. And I guess it's for one of your people, or maybe more than one of your people, to explain that. And the second part of that question is, if the county cedes control of that public land to a developer, under what conditions can the county impose restrictions on how that developer manages that property and handles it in accordance with the law?
That's really good questions, David. And I don't know, actually, I know there's the 90 or 99-year lease or 90-year lease that the county has by the Wheelie Metro. Barbara, I don't know if you have any background you could provide on that, Barbara Byron.
Hi, thank you. This is Barbara Byron. I'm having feedback. I'm not sure why. Let me see. Can you hear me now or no?
Yes. Yeah, that's okay.
Okay, I can't hear you, but I can hear my feedback, so I'll try it this way. So for us to give up control of our public land, we have to have a public hearing, first of all. So it is a public process. There are several public-private partnerships that we've entered into, and I think the Whaley Avenue Garage was one of those. The residents at the government center where we own the land but allowed a private developer to build affordable housing is another. It's something that we do with some regularity, but it's always a public process. And yes, absolutely, there can be development conditions associated with it. Typically, you not only have the private development agreement, but there is also the public zoning process that goes along with it.
Barbara, thank you very much.
Walter, if I could ask just a quick follow-up question.
Sure.
For example, the I believe it's Inova has the property in that area that one of the folks was complaining about having trash and all that stuff. What actions could the county take to clean that up, to force the tenant, if you will, to take care of that?
Well, actually, let me address that because I believe before I took office, it was a biohazard issue right over there. And I know that it was cleaned up mostly at one point. I know there was more recently that had been put on hold because of COVID. I believe the sheriff's office was out there at one point before COVID hit. So that's certainly something, my office can take a look at as well. There are ongoing discussions, including some conversations with Design Review Board and Reston Association about the long-term status of Reston Town Center North. So that is likely something else that'll be coming back for the longer-term use. But short-term, we'll check into that, David. Okay, thanks. And let's go next. Let's see. I believe Jason Besky was next. Jason?
All right. Thanks, Walter. I just wanted to bring up a couple ideas I raised a month or so ago, but when I talked about big ideas, and one of those was around open space. First of all, I think it's important to Diana's point earlier, and in what I've seen in practice is that the more public space is, the better it functions. Even if there are development restrictions, easements, whatnot, it is tough to really fully enjoy private development that is public space. But back to the big ideas, I think it's really important. And I raised the question about if the Nats win the World Series or we want to protest, where do we go as Restonians? And we don't have a heart of the community and central gathering place. So at a minimum, I would love to see that one signature central gathering place. Whether it be in Reston Town Center North or wherever, but by all means, that should be public. Looking at the village centers, I think we should still look at, it's hard to say what should happen. I think that's the next best place for public spaces to occur and be developed as redevelopment occurs. And to the degree that those can, again, be public, that would be great, understanding that, a developer may come in and want to wholesale do a redevelopment of a village center at some point. So those are my comments. I think we should, if we do anything, we should try to have, get everybody behind the concept of a central gathering place in the heart of the community. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jason. Let's go to Jan next. Jan, I think you should have gone before Jason, but I got my alphabet.
That's all right. That's fine. Food for thought. Open space issues. Did somebody mention at the beginning that there were some open spaces that were difficult to get to? And what are they and how would we improve the access to them? I know that at Hunters Woods Village Center, this is an RA property, but you actually have to go up to the center and know that you need to walk past the Lutheran church and take a path to get to what they are redeveloping to a nice garden and plantings and that sort of thing. Taking up from the golf course, from the baseball field and making it into something that everybody can enjoy. But as I say, in order to get to that, they either park in the community, which is Britton Court, to get to it, or they have to park up at Hunters Woods and know that they need to walk past the Lutheran church, go down the black path, and that they will reach it. So that is one of them that's difficult to find, difficult to have access to. And there may be more. I would be interested if there are more, if we could take a look at that and see accessibility and how we could improve that. If that's the case, I did hear that though at the beginning, and I thought that was one of the issues that we were going to talk about. The other thing is that I've talked to homeless, and they tell me that they don't want to go into the shelter because people tend to steal their things when they're asleep. And so there's a mounting fear among a lot of homeless that they just, the resources there, and that's wonderful and handy, but they would prefer to go to the Reston Community Center and sit in the lobby than they would try their chances elsewhere. So that's just information that I know a lot of homeless people, so that's just what they've been telling me, is they go near the shelter. And the shelter is a wonderful facility. These individuals just have a lot of people. I think that makes 2 cents.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Jen.
One more thing. Talking about redevelopment, when they made Hunters Woods, Boston Properties, I don't think it's Boston, but at any rate, they had a helipad design at the center, right before the community center. And a lot of people objected to that helicopter pad. And so they came back in and actually changed it to grass and plantings, and it was redeveloped. So I think that's an example of redevelopment.
Okay, thank you, Jan.
Welcome.
All right, we do have a few more hands. We got Charles. Let's see if we can move through this and then move on. Charles, you're next. Then I see Larry and Mark and Michelle, and then we got to move on.
All right, I'll go quickly. I just wanted to throw out 2 ideas that probably need some more chewing on. One, in all this talk of private use, I wonder if there's a potential for the county itself to find a way to incentivize private owners to make land available for recreational use. I see there's a perfectly good fishing pond down the street from my home, but it's filled with no trespassing signs, no reason why it shouldn't be a park, but the land is there. Second thought on the homelessness issue, I've learned myself working hypothermia volunteer, is that many homeless actually have jobs. Like they don't have a lot of the traditional issues. They just can't afford to get an apartment in this area. The one thing I think that might be interesting is allotments for something like called workers housing, something like a YMCA where people might actually pay for it, but it's very low cost and you can have a shower in a safe place. So there's people who actually would commute from the hypothermia, go off to retail or other types of jobs, and I think earn money. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charles. Appreciate that. Let's go Larry, then Mark, then Michelle, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, just real quick, I wanted to, somebody commented earlier about, the county leasing 99-year lease to, Comstock or whatever. The reverse is also true. The example that we have here in Reston that has been very successful is Southgate Community Center, which is RA property, where the county is leasing that from us for 99 years. And, it now is, not that it wasn't a public space before as a pool, but it's now even a more public space, much more utilized. So the reverse can also work. I just want to point that out.
Thank you, Larry. Appreciate that. Okay, Mark Malcolm, then Michelle Kimmel.
Thank you. It follows directly on what Larry said, also with David Vanell and Charles Colby. We have to remember that the comprehensive plan for Reston involves the 3 TSAs. 2 of the TSAs, practically no land would be set aside for open space recreation. However, I have to remind all that in the Herndon TSA, 2 things. Number 1 is private property. The Massachusetts Mutual property has the lake that's supposed to, or pond that's supposed to be the great public attraction, but it's private. So that hasn't really been pursued and needs to be considered. The second thing is the Board of Supervisors property itself, which has still got about 14, 15 plus acres. Originally, it was intended to be private-public partnership to have roughly 2,000 apartments and also a million plus, actually 2 million square feet of office space. That, as we have discussed, Walter, you and I, should it be a public-private partnership or should it be completely purposed for public use? That's something that needs to be addressed in this comprehensive plan as we relook at doing things differently. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mark. And let's go to Michelle. You get the last word on open space.
Okay, great. Well, actually, I wanted to bring up something instead on affordable housing, because it seems like the answer of more housing only covers half of the equation, and the new housing that we're getting is incredibly expensive and will not address the problems that we have. And instead, it seems the strategy is just one of hope, hope that we'll get affordable housing somewhere near jobs. But instead, what I'd like to hope is that we really take on and incorporate in this task force affordable housing and figure out how we can prioritize that.
Yes, and actually that is an upcoming topic in terms of the affordable housing policies in the comprehensive plan for Reston specifically. So definitely, Michelle, thank you for bringing that up. Okay, I want to thank everybody, the panelists who participated in this. Really appreciate your input. What I'd ask is for task force members who have additional ideas to please let Jose know or send around to the task force listserv additional ideas. What we'll try to do is compile those and to see if there's some common elements and come back to the task force with some possible comprehensive plan update language relating to the issues discussed tonight. So let's move on. We have a very important next topic, and folks from the panel, you're welcome to stay, but no problem. You have other things going on. So tonight we also have a discussion of public art, and this is a topic. There were a couple of items listed in the agenda as reading materials. So I don't know if folks got a chance to look at any of that, but in the current comprehensive plan for Reston, there is some language already addressing public art. And there was also a link to the Fairfax County policy plan which is the county-wide portion of the comprehensive plan relating to visual and performing arts. So for those of you that had a chance to look at that ahead of time, you're going to be ahead of the game. But if you didn't and you have a chance to maybe sneak a peek at that before or during our discussion tonight, please go ahead and do so. We do have tonight 3 panelists. We have another panel, and I wanted to see if we have Lila Gordon, who's here on behalf of Public Art Reston. We have Lisa Merriam from Arts Fairfax, and Janelle Hazard from Grace. So what I'd like to do is similar to what we did with the last panel, is offer each of these panelists a couple minutes to provide some background information. And Lila, I'm going to offer it to you first. And I believe you might have a presentation. At least I heard that rumor.
Well, no, actually, I sent Jose a couple of resource documents. And
that's right. So we have the presentation.
You have those documents, and feel free to share them with the task force. One of them is just my notes, my cheat sheet for tonight, and the other is a set of thumbnails of public art projects that exist in Reston. And I have some notes attached to those particular thumbnails, giving some background on them. But I would urge everybody, in addition to the resources you sent out ahead of time, to take a look at the publicartreston.org website. And on that website, there is an extensive gallery of Reston's public art collection. And there's also another important document that you can look at, the actual Reston Public Art Master Plan. So just briefly, Public Art Reston is a bit more than 10 years old. I think we're about 12 or 13 years old now. And it was formed by most of Reston's civic organizations, the Reston Association, Reston Town Center Association, Reston Community Center, Greater Reston Chamber of Commerce, Greater Reston Arts Center, and initially Arts Fairfax was also involved in the early history of Public Art Reston. For the first several years of its existence, it was called IPAR, the Initiative for Public Art Reston. And we've spent a couple of years teaching ourselves not to ever say IPAR. So that's the last time you'll hear me say IPAR. And we are all well trained now to talk only about Public Art Reston. The main activity originally was to create a public art master plan. And this is an activity that allows a community to go through a process and identify the kinds of opportunities that exist for public art, the nature of how public art should be realized, and some of the benchmarks that you want public art projects to meet. The structure for an unincorporated community has worked remarkably well. And I would say to the task force that it will be vital, I think, for whatever revisions you come up with to the Reston Master Plan, that you continue to support and endorse a robust presence for public art. The notes that I sent to Jose will give you some specific ideas around what key points should be referenced, but it's critical to know that for outstanding landmark pieces of public art to be realized, it almost always takes more money than anybody can imagine to commission and create public art. You heard a little bit about what Robert Gowdy described the cost just to maintain the iconic Mercury Fountain, which is a central visual identifier for Reston Town Center and certainly for all of us. So you can't
expect that significant public art can be realized without multiple funding resources. So you need to support the notion of funding from the public coffers, funding from the private sector, funding through the development process, through specific proffers for public art amenities, and funding from individuals and community resources, whether those are nonprofit or private giving resources. It's an all of the above proposition, and I think the collection, if you visit it online, you'll recognize that having an all of the above approach is really essential to accumulating the kind of beautiful and robust and fun and engaging pieces of public art that exist presently in Reston. In the master plan for Reston's public art, there are many details about the kinds of working zones that Public Art Reston's identified. So things like the underpass system, the gateways and major places. I found the conversation about public-private open space fascinating. And I think that's a conversation that has so many layers to it that we're probably going to be talking about that for many decades to come. And there's no one perfect solution. The ability of the Public Art Reston structure to work, the beauty of it is in the collaborative nature of the founding civic organizations. And each organization brings some portfolio of resources to the effort. And then I would also say that you should give reference to and support to the notion that a robust public art collection is one that also has to be maintained, so that when you create these beautiful and engaging pieces of art throughout a community, you want to also be sure that you recognize an ongoing responsibility to the maintenance of those artworks and to the documentation of their creation and managing them from a collection perspective. And then thinking also, because not everything lasts forever, you know, what you do in terms of deaccessioning or replacing public art in places over time, if a piece is no longer relevant to the community in which it's situated. And then also I would ask you to be sure you endorse the notion of temporary public art projects as well. Big examples of those that people might be familiar with are the Lake Thoreau Spillway art project that the South Lakes High School STEAM team creates every year. And then we've had several other pieces that I hope Janelle will talk about in terms of beautiful and temporary public art that people fall in love with and then get very upset about having it go away, which typically happens with temporary public art projects. I think the main thing I would impart to the task force is to continue this tradition in terms of support, endorsing language, recommending language. The Fairfax County Comprehensive Plan Performing and Visual Arts Policy Statement is excellent, and that should also be referenced. It echoes and picks up on many of the issues that are treated in Reston's Public Art Master Plan. And going forward, when we create a county-wide public art plan, it's likely that that plan will reference a community like Reston that has its own public art master plan, but also vehicles like Arts Fairfax or other arts organizations throughout the county, the Workhouse in South County, that can partner with communities and help make sure that there is a robust public art presence across the county and accessible to and in reflection of all of the county's many diverse communities. So I love public art, and we've had an amazingly successful effort in Reston, and And I think probably all of you have your favorite pieces of it.
All right, Lila, thank you so much. And yes, thank you for pointing out. Jose did circulate the documents that you sent, or maybe one was a presentation actually. And so hopefully everybody got a chance to see that. Some wonderful photographs in there. So thank you for reminding us of what we have out there already. So of course the comprehensive plan is mostly looking forward. So I think we got a wonderful starting point to work from here. So thank you very much, Lila. Let's go to Lisa from Arts Fairfax. Lisa, do you want to share a few words with us at this point?
Hi, yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm the Director of Grants and Services at Arts Fairfax, and I am so thrilled that we've been able to fund many of the projects that Public Art Reston and Greater Reston Arts Center have been able to execute in Reston. And I have some sort of more general comments about public art, and especially right now, why public art matters more than ever, because public art is really a platform for civic dialogue and the most democratic of art forms. And when done well, a public artwork engages citizens in conversation that can vary from understanding historical and cultural backgrounds to driving attachment to the place and social cohesion. And right now, when we're struggling so much in so many ways to connect, public art can make public spaces more approachable. And our national service agency, Americans for the Arts, points out 5 key reasons that we want to include public art in our communities. And I'll just run through those really quickly. Economic growth and sustainability. By engaging in public art as a tool for growth and sustainability, communities can thrive economically. Attachment and cultural identity. Public art directly influences how people see and connect with a place, and aesthetics is one of the top 3 characteristics of why residents attach themselves to a community. Artists as contributors, providing a public art ecosystem supports artists and other creatives by validating them as important contributors to the community. And many of the projects in Reston have been executed by local artists, some of them residents of Reston. Social cohesion and cultural understanding. Public art provides a visual mechanism for understanding other cultures and perspectives and reinforcing social connectivity with others. And finally, public art can help with health and belonging. Public art addresses public health and personal illness by reducing stress, providing a sense of belonging. And public art is noted as slowing pedestrians down and also helping them to enjoy the space and providing a positive impact on our mood. And, in the course of my work, I often hear that Reston is ahead of other areas in the county in having a public art master plan. And the Reston plan is often viewed as Lila. So I'm just here to support and encourage you to continue this tradition, and if at all possible, look at the language and see how it can be strengthened.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Lisa. We appreciate you being here very much. Being here virtually, of course. Janelle from the Greater Reston Arts Center, welcome, and thank you for being here as well. Are there any thoughts you would like to share this evening?
Yes, and thank you for having me. I'm going to share a quick presentation. It's difficult to talk about art without visuals. Can everyone see that? Okay. All right, so my name is Janelle Hazard, and I'm the Executive Director and Curator at Greater Reston Arts Center. And I'm just going to share a few public art projects that, that emphasize our belief in the importance of extending art into the community and beyond our gallery walls. These are some of the projects that Lila was hinting at earlier during her presentation. So, not sure on my end. I think I just review. Okay. So first is the Bird in a Hand installation by Patrick Dougherty. It was created in collaboration with Public Art Reston, and it was created in spring 2015, focusing on an environmental art installation. It was accompanied by an exhibition in the Grace Gallery, which documented Dougherty's monumental site-specific sculptures from around the world. Here we see the public art installation, which was titled A Bird in Hand, and it was created from regionally sourced saplings, and his magical immersive work responded to both natural and built environments. What's really special about Dougherty's work is that it had a deep level of community engagement. So both Grace and Public Art Reston harnessed community to assist in collecting saplings with their own hands and ultimately contributed to the creation of the work itself. With large-scale public art installations such as these, it takes a village, and I cannot emphasize enough the importance of contributors, sponsors, donors, partners, and making all of this happen. So here you'll see a few of the major contributors for this project, including Willardsburg, Virginia, National Endowment for the Arts, the Arts Council for Fairfax County, Reston Association, Reston Community Center, Reston Town Center, and the list goes on. Another major installation for Greater Reston Arts Center was our most recent installation that happened earlier this year, titled The Buoyant Force by artist Sue Warburton. The Buoyant Force is a 50-foot steel sculpture by Sue Warburton, inspired by the paintings of American surrealist Kay Sage. Sage's work is recognized by paintings of scaffolded structures and furled fabric and desolate landscapes. And here you'll see the influence of that in the work through the sails and some of the whimsical nature of the installation. This installation provided an opportunity to present meaningful content to the area and highlight two under-recognized American female artists. Similar to the Dougherty exhibition, this show also became to fruition from a solo exhibition of Warburton's work at the Greater Reston Arts Center Gallery. And after an extensive process of working with designers, fabricators, engineers, eventually Grace was able to commission this work by artist Sue Warburton, which was her first ever outdoor installation. This particular piece is a prime example of the impact that public art can provide. With Grace, we have offered several virtual experiences during the course of this year due to the pandemic, since we closed our galleries at the beginning of this fall. But the Buoyant Force has been the only physical experience we've been able to offer. And even better, we were able to activate it and allow an escape, a version of visitor engagement that is a first for us. And so here you'll see a sign of our QR code activation for the sculpture. It is created in partnership with the Playful City Lab at American University. There goes one of those partnerships I mentioned earlier. And this installation will feature an evolving cast of guest oracles and narratives over the next 5 years that it remains installed. And this feature is activated just by using your phone. Once it's activated, you can learn more about the process, the fabrication, and the artist's intention behind the sculpture. Again, this is another prime example of how this is not possible without the large community of collaborators and contributors. So Reston Town Center, Reston Community Center, Whiting and Turner, Arts Fairfax, Public Art Reston. Contributions are important, both big and small. And for this particular installation, we have a text feature where people who visit the sculpture can donate just by texting a number with their phone. And lastly, just a quick example of how the impact for public art can truly extend past expectations. And so here is an example of press coverage that we received from WETA recently on this sculpture. And so I've just spoken a little bit about public art projects and how they come into fruition, how public art is beneficial, engaging, how it provides a bit of peace and happiness, and ultimately is really important for the community.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Janelle. It's a really nice presentation. It's nice to be reminded of, well, some of the temporary that are more permanent, at least in some of our memories. So thank you. I want to open it up now to see if there are any questions from task force members or comments. I see a couple of hands. David Vanell, looks like your hand is up. David, did you have a comment?
I'm sorry. Could you come back to me for a minute? I've got a couple kind of questions I'm writing down right now.
Oh, yeah, no problem. Larry Butler also has his hand up. Larry, did you want to have your hand up? Maybe you didn't.
No, I left it up from last time. I'm good.
Okay, no problem. Okay, actually, I see a couple of others. Burton, Burton's hand is up. Go right ahead, Burton.
Hi. Yeah, I was interested in this presentation. I think that I don't know if anyone really could disagree with the idea that public art is important. I'd be surprised if any task force members disagree with that idea. But I personally would like to see more of an emphasis on local artists in the public art that is happening in Reston. And I'm curious what the panelists think about there being a conflict between an artist's vision and art being directed by a government. You know, is it really art if it's a project that's directed by a government? And, you know, can you have democratic art, or does art need to be the vision of an artist?
All right, thank you, Burton. Do any of the panelists want to take on any of that?
So as a government employee and somebody who's been involved with a lot of public art, I think that the interplay between public funding and the realization of art is one that can take a lot of different forms and a lot of different sort of process routes. I think the beauty of having plan documents and government support for art suggests that the community has an interest in assuring that art is available in the community and accessible to all. It may not mean that every work of art is loved by the community as an entire unit, but everybody has an opportunity to engage with art and react to it. So the processes of public art Reston that are critical to the success of public art projects in this community, I think, are the follow-on education and engagement processes that usually occur between the community and artists who are determined to be the right artist for the space and place and time. None of that is ever perfect, but as somebody who's had to choose artists to present to the community for many, many decades, I can tell you that the closer you are to the community being served, the better your track record tends to be in terms of finding enough diversity of form and media and personalities and creations to meet the taste needs of the community as a whole. I hope that was helpful.
Thank you very much, Lila. Any other comments from panelists? Okay. All right. Thank you very much for the question. Christopher Daniel also has his hand up. Here we go.
Thanks. Well, many famous works of public art were conscripted by the government, the Works Progress Program. That I could note right there. But what I wanted to ask is, from the perspective of the task force, is there something we can do as part of our initiative to create spaces that encourage these types of areas where public art could occur? I noticed this from a previous issue that I've dealt with on the Fairfax County Architectural Review Board, is with the Lorton Workhouse and public art there. And sometimes it's a challenge to put something up that isn't, as we talked about, distracting, but is also encouraging. Are there the spaces available to put that? And is there a way when we're undertaking this effort to identify those spaces? And I just don't know. And so that's a genuine question to the county staff and to everyone here to say, are there ways that we could empower those spaces? Because I think that public art only benefits a community.
Thank you very much. I don't know if anybody from DPD might want to address that.
Walter, I can jump. It's Mark Looney.
Yeah, sure, Mark. You are not DPD, but go right ahead.
I was just going to say pretty much every zoning application that comes through these days is expected to proffer either money or space for some form of public art, typically coordinated through Public Art Reston. It depends on the size of the project as to whether they're providing it on site or whether the expectation is to fund a project offsite on some other type of public space. But in the last probably 10 years, I think almost every project going through the zoning process has in some form or fashion contributed towards that. That doesn't mean that the art is necessarily installed, because it's typically timed to the development itself. But there are proper commitments that over time should create more and more opportunities throughout the community for that.
Yeah, Mark is
Okay.
exactly right. And the Rose Ensemble, the underpass art project at Colts Neck Road, was actually kickstarted by proffer money that was put forward by Atlantic Realty associated with the Trails Edge project there. So the proffer system is a very critical and important part of helping get major art projects funded at the level that's required, and to get them considered as a project's being built and designed, and thinking about it as an aesthetic whole environment.
All right, thank you very much, Lila. Let's move on. We have a couple more questions. We're getting close to the top of the hour, and I forgot to mention that, but we do like to wrap up in 2 hours here. We have the task force member with the coolest name, Reston Bell. Reston, go right ahead and
I love your introductions every time. It's the greatest. I think Layla, is it, or Leela? I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name incorrect. You said some of the things that I was mentioning. Just, I know I have some friends who are in art, and I will say that some of the pieces commissioned by governments are things that kind of keep them running. And so there's like mutual appreciation, like for them to have funding and some type of outlet, but also an understanding that if something is commissioned by the government, that they're like a public, for a public space, that there are going to be some potential limitations there. But I really do love the idea offered of maybe there is a space that we could, kind of carve out where people can kind of do their own thing and just have the opportunity to express freely and do what comes to mind. The other question or thought I had is I remember as a very young child that we used to do pieces like in elementary school. Like there were pieces that like the school, like children were commissioned to do essentially, where they would put it out and around like the community and like some of the village centers and spaces. And I just wondered if that's still, I mean, I know right now things are virtual and, what have you, but I wondered if that still takes place or if there are any formalized programs or like, I don't know, memorandums of understanding or something like that, where like children's work has the opportunity, to kind of begin to be expressed. I feel like as the International Baccalaureate program at South Lakes kind of took shape, that a lot of the artwork that young people were doing kind of stayed in-house. But I think it'd be awesome if we could kind of return the arts. It used to be very central to Reston years ago. And I think it'd be awesome if we could keep celebrating that to, kind of foster that for young people in the community.
Lila,
so Reston, and I love your name too. The work Emerge by Valerie Teberge, that was one of the first public art projects that Public Art Reston initiated. it involved a student engagement process with Hunters Woods Elementary School, and the work that the kids did are actually a part of that artwork. They created sort of star-shaped mosaic forms that then extended into the tunnel. And so you can visit that and see, and there's an information plaque, and there's also information on the website about it. And then the other piece that is phenomenal student project every year. Again, multiple funding streams and partners, but under Marco Rando's direction at South Lakes High School, the STEAM team, which is it's the right formulation of STEM with the A for art in there. And they create a project on an annual basis and part of the purpose is for them to obviously combine the engineering and the fabrication learning that has to occur with public art. And also they have to take that project all the way through the design review board process with Reston Association. So they get a lot of help from Reston Association because that's their property. And there's a private homeowners group in that neighborhood that also contributes funds. Public Art Reston helps fund it. Obviously, the school system itself provides support because it's a formal program in the school. So it's a big part of what the Public Art Master Plan calls for, and what ultimately the county's Public Art Master Plan will call for is that very critical engagement with young people, engagement like the Rose Ensemble all incorporated students, but it also worked with the older residents at the Hunters Woods Fellowship House doing the same kinds of art activities. So the students' work, the older people's work, all of that is incorporated into the Colts Neck Road Underpass project, the Thoreau's Ensemble. So I think it's a really strong Reston tradition and one that will continue.
Fantastic, thank you.
All right, thank you, Reston. Thank you, Lila. We have David Bunnell, and then we have one attendee with a comment or a question. So David, why don't you go ahead and we'll wrap up around on time.
Thank you very much. A couple of questions, actually. First one for maybe Leila or the other panelists. To what extent, and she might have touched on this a little bit, to what extent are you gathering a wide variety of artists to help in the selection for a particular site? To ensure the quality of it, to ensure the diversity of it. And the second part is maybe for your staff, sir, or even Mark Looney, how is the county making sure, how is the county following up when a developer commits to public art? And because there are some who commit to it and then don't do it. And I'm concerned about how we make sure both the selection of the art is quality based, and the developers are the developers must follow up with something of quality that is not determined by them.
So again, just briefly, quality is a tough nut to crack. I mean, you can use reviews, you can use credentials, you can use past projects and history. The Public Art Master Plan for Reston envisions a committee of the Public Art Reston organization, the Public Art Committee. That committee is supposed to have representation from architecture, from landscaping, from art as a discipline, as well as representation from the community on that. And the committee changes over time. Its membership is not static. So that committee functions in a way to kind of represent the community and to represent the goals of the master plan. And then there is diversity too in the perspectives of the professionals involved in these organizations. Certainly, equity and diversity are at the heart of RCC's mission. Definitely show up in the constant work that Grace does, and the work that Public Art Reston has done over time. And so as long as you enshrine those principles in your plan and you are accountable to that plan and accountable to the constituents that are represented in the plan, you have a reasonable shot at success. I want to be clear that, not every project, every time, all the time is going to be a home run. And there has to be room for experimentation. I know Jane L can talk at length about how a public art project can grow and expand and take longer and involve more problem solving than you ever imagined at the outset. It's a very organic kind of enterprise, and the insurance that it turns out right is kind of built into how thoughtful your foundation is, your plan is, and how many civic organizations and partners are at the table. So I hope that gives you some confidence that there's a good structure for realizing those very important goals that you described.
Well, thank you very much. I just want to make sure that there's a process and that you're not having any difficulty getting people to sit on those committees, and you're not having any trouble finding artists willing to produce. I am all in favor of art that doesn't please everybody, and that's kind of, I think, one of the defining moments, but the defining goals. But okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, that's how you know it's art.
All right, great. And actually, Jose, did you want to add anything in terms of the proffer process?
Oh yeah, I think David had a follow-up question about how is the county following through on these public art commitments. And the short answer is that usually when developers want to get off bond, they must satisfy some of these proffer commitments. And maybe Mark Looney has a better response, but I did want to add one caveat that the way that the proffer language is written is also important as well. So it could be vague. So I remember my short time in the office that when I spoke with Ann Delaney at PAR earlier on, she said that you could satisfy those requirements if it was kind of vague or poorly written, where you could just have a conversation with her and then, okay, I satisfy the requirement, and just hang up the phone, and then it comes from there. But that's one variation of it. But yeah, so the way that the proffers are written are also important.
Jose, I have an example up on my screen. If you want to let me share my screen for a second, I can show everybody a kind of typical proffer that you might see. This was for the Lincoln project on Sunrise Valley Drive near the Wheelie Metro Station. Let me see if I can find it here. Can everybody see that?
Yes. Yeah, we can see it.
So this is, I wouldn't say that this is the model nor the one to throw out either. This is kind of a typical run-of-the-mill proffer, but in essence, what it requires is that the applicant in this case coordinate with what was then IPAR, now just PAR, with respect to the type of public art to be provided, the location within the property, et cetera, with the property owner making the ultimate selection as opposed to Public Art Reston, and it requires the art to be installed prior to what's called the 130th RUP, which that's effectively an occupancy permit. So if there are 350 units in the building prior to occupying the 130th out of 350 units, they would have to have the art installed within the project. And the reason for putting that timing in there is for the county to be able to track the fact that the art has been installed pursuant to the proffers. And if for some reason it hasn't, then they can deny occupancy permits for anything beyond the first 130 units until the art is installed. So that's kind of the typical way that it's approached. Others will have perhaps more elaborate consultation requirements or a specific notion for what they want to do, but that's kind of the typical way these things are structured.
Thank you very much for that example. And I did want to remind everybody, this process, one of the things, the main thing that we're doing is looking at language in the current Reston Comprehensive Plan to see if the language might need to be updated. And Mark, the example you gave of proffer language is very important because proffers oftentimes take their cues from what is written in the comprehensive plan. So I'd encourage task force members and attendees, be sure to take a look at that language in the current comprehensive plan and see if there's anything missing or if there's anything that you think might need to be reworded. Okay, thank you. Good discussion. We do have one question or hand up from an attendee who I want to get before we sign off here. John Farrell, you get the last word.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. Back before the last ice age, when I was studying land use and local government, if I had turned in a draft comprehensive plan to my professor that ignored 16% of the land area of the jurisdiction I was working on, I could have anticipated getting an F, and that would have been appropriate. The 16% of the land I'm talking about that is in Reston contains 800 acres of woodland, 15 meadows, 20 miles of stream, 4 lakes, 4 wetlands, 3 ponds, 55 miles of trail, and 15 ball fields. All of it is open to the general public. And in fact, to contrary to what you may have heard, some of that land was used by Reston Strong to organize the demonstration after George Floyd's murder. It is clear that one of the deficiencies that needs to be corrected in the next draft of the comprehensive plan is a recognition of the fact that Reston Association's open space, Walter, is a major asset to the 60,000 people who live here. And if you go through the current comprehensive plan, none of the features I just mentioned is referenced in that comprehensive plan. And if you did a survey of the 60,000 people who live in Reston, most of them would tell you that that's where they get their recreation and open space, and that's where they connect to nature. And contrast that to the Park Authority, who only has 4 ball fields. And you can see that when you compare 1,350 acres compared to the 4 ball fields that the Park Authority has, the extent of Reston Association's contribution to meeting the open space needs and the recreational needs of the people who live here is overwhelming. And yet, if you go through the comprehensive plan, you'd never know it. And I think that's a major deficiency that hopefully in this draft of the comprehensive plan will be recognized, will be described, and will be detailed with most of the items I just mentioned. There is no restriction on the general public using any of those facilities. The only place where you need to have some kind of a Reston issued pass is on the 14 swimming pools and 52 tennis courts. But otherwise, anybody's welcome. There's no gates, there's no permission, there's nothing. It is open to the general public. And it troubles me that a comprehensive plan doesn't talk about that element of Reston that's unique and is different from Tyson's or any other part of the Fairfax County comprehensive plan.
All right, John, thank you very much. I said you were going to get the last word, but actually Larry just submitted a comment, said good comment, John. So I'm going to give Larry the last word tonight. But thank you very much, John. And thanks, everybody. That was, I think, an appropriate way of closing the loop back on some of the open space discussion and some of the broader things that were discussed tonight. Thanks, everybody. We're running a little bit over, but not too bad. Appreciate everybody's input on both public art and on the open space discussion. Please do provide any comments, suggestions on how the comprehensive plan might need to be updated. I would suggest either sending them to Jose and or sending them through the listserv. And we will basically come back and I'll work with staff and get draft language to come back to the task force for review early in the next year. So does anyone have any final comments or questions before we break for the evening?
Merry Christmas.
Thank you, John.
Happy holiday.
All right. Thanks, everybody. And everyone do have a safe and stay healthy out there. Safe holidays.
Thanks to all the presenters.
Bye-bye.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, presenters, very much.